people. Thanks for joining. Lovely to see you. We're going to be starting in a couple of minutes. It's just before 7:30. But tonight I have Ian Andrews with me, and we're going to be talking about in public creating with the community. And thanks if you were with me last night for the chaos that ensued when I had to run from my shed.
Somebody's sending us hearts. That's very sweet of them.
I had to run from my shed into the kitchen with everything to restart the live feed. So that was really quite traumatic.
You were like a swan.
Yes, very much so. Smooth.
A desperately panicking swan.
Yes, quite right. Anyway, last night I was talking about Willard Wigan, MBE, the sculptor who does the miniatures, and Willard Wigan, that I bought my daughter an 18th birthday present, and this is what I bought her, and it sits in her sitting room in France where she lives, and she loves it and I love it. But when I saw Willard in Sutton Coldfield, where he had his exhibition, I think 2 years ago now, he had this. Also, a recent new sculpture that he'd made, and I was interested to see that I felt that there was a vague similarity in perhaps length of neck and profile of the face. But since I couldn't show them to you last night, I thought I would give you the pleasure of seeing them tonight. So now that it's very nearly 7:30, I think we'll start properly. And there you go. There's in public. That's one of the PowerPoint presentations that we show people when we're going out to try and gain more business.
Can you switch it back to something?
And here we are, Ian and I together, in my kitchen, nice and dry, not having to run...
With a decent internet connection.
With a decent internet connection. We hope. Anyway, lovely to see you all. Right, Ian, shall we make a start?
Yes.
What would you like to say about how we actually came...
We were trying to think, weren't we, how we came to work together, and neither of us could actually pin it down.
No.
But we're both obsessed with sort of outreach and reaching a different audience than the one you would normally get from doing art exhibitions. I think they're euphemistically known as hard-to-reach audiences, but basically anybody who doesn't normally go in a gallery, it seemed to me, was a reasonable target for doing some art with.
And we also realised that we had, both of us, very good skills that the other person didn't have. I'm very good at blagging away and trying to get things out of people, so venues and space. And Ian, of course, coming from education, had all those skills to put together. So we felt that we would make a good team to go out and work with very various audiences and different people.
And it's proved to be
And
true.
it's proved to be successful.
Although we haven't done anything for almost a year and a half now.
Yes.
Because we pursued a few solo projects that got in the way, really.
Well, we should have done something this summer, of course, at Warwick School.
Yes.
Warwick School, we were invited.
Not a hard-to-reach audience, a private school, but there we go.
No, a private school. But sadly, of course, because of COVID, that all fell through. But, right, shall we...
Let's show some slides.
Yes, we'll show some slides.
We're not going to try this business where you have a little thumbnail of us. We're going to literally flick the camera over and go from the laptop because we are both digitally challenged, and this seems a better way of doing it.
Right, there we go. So...
I'm in charge of the slides, I've just remembered.
Yes, Ian is in charge of slides.
Right, this was our first sort of go, really, and was a freebie in the sense that we didn't get a fee for it, but we got a free studio space at the Innovation
Centre. Right, Innovation Birmingham.
Innovation Birmingham.
And it was Hugo Russell who was working there at that time, and he had an empty unit and offered it to us so that we could test out some of our ideas with an audience.
And he was interested. It's an incubation hub for entrepreneurs, I think, involved in tech, isn't it?
Yes.
Was that the
Yes.
was that the common denominator?
Yes.
So he was interested to see whether there was any common denominator in what drove people to try and set up a business at the hub. And so we ensconced ourselves in one of the units, took over with our pop-up banners, and Sarah used to sit outside and waylay people as they went past, trying to attract them in to make some artwork about what they were, about their motivations for being there in the first place, really.
But these people sometimes only had about 15 minutes, and so it was a very quick conversation, and then they disappeared, and then they'd come back, because sometimes they were just telling us a story and asking us to respond to that story.
I did that so slickly and then jogged it. So this was Martin. Now I don't remember what his job was or what his company was that he was setting up, but we called it objects of inspiration as a way of sort of focusing their attention and focusing their thinking. We asked them to bring in an object that either expressed something they were inspired by, that had caused them to set up their company or set up their startup. And he brought in this little ceramic of a hare, and I made some drawings of it across the top here based on what he was telling me, which he was absolutely thrilled with. And actually, we stayed in touch with him for a while afterwards, and he attended some of our exhibitions in other places. I'm going to pull back again now. Oh, I'm doing this so slickly, it's frightening.
Well done, well done.
Now, okay, this in a way sort of is what we realised that this was going to be about. This wasn't actually an entrepreneur at the hub. This was a guy who was there doing the catering for the innovation centre, but he came in because he got curious. And his object was a swan, and he made it in front of us, and we filmed him. Once we knew what he was going to do, we filmed him doing it. So this is him making... Well, I'm giving it away now, really.
Yes, no, well, that's fine.
He's making a swan.
But it related to a story his mother had told him, a fairy tale story about a family with girls and a boy, and one of them turned into a swan. And
he was from a massive family, wasn't he? He was one of 8, 9, 10, something crazy.
Yes.
And I think there was some tragedy there, but I can't remember the details now. But this swan seemed to represent his mother, as well as the stories she used to tell them. And somebody had been transformed into a swan, and then this family had to go and try and find the secret that would transform them back. So the swan had this sort of transformative capacity, or the story was about transformation. And he made this swan for us in his break, literally in between catering sessions.
As quickly as he is now, because we haven't fast forwarded or edited this at all. This is literally what he did. So he made it in the time that you're watching this.
And then he didn't have time to engage with us anymore. So he had to rush off, and he said, I'll come back when I have my next break, which was about 40 minutes or something.
Yes.
So we thought, right, okay, we're going to respond to this. And he told us this fairy story. So we made a little film for him where we used the swan that he'd made behind a shadow screen, so it was just shadows. And this was a kind of a tribute to his mother.
Angelica.
Yeah, Angelica, who had brought them up and who had told them these stories and who'd left them with this, well, warm glow, really.
Yes.
He was very, very sort of obsessed with his mum and what she tried to do for them. I think she passed away, hadn't she,
yes,
if I remember rightly?
Yes.
So this is what we made, literally in about 40 minutes for him, whilst talking to other people who were dropping by. and he came back to see us and thought we'd downloaded it from the internet. And then we told him that we'd done it to, as a tribute to his mum, and he was literally in tears.
He was in tears, and he was so grateful. And, it was just lovely that he felt that he could drop in and offer us this very personal gift in a way. And then after that, he popped in every day just to say hello and were we all right, and,
And we met some amazing people during that time. There was Mary, who was developing an app for dementia sufferers. So it was an app on your phone, and you would point it at objects around the house, and it would give you the history of the object, so that the dementia sufferer would be reminded of memories and so on that presumably could well be slipping away. So we did something for her as well. We haven't got slides of that.
No. What we did was she brought in a vase, and because of the dementia and the loss of memory, we actually decided that we would blow bubbles. And so we blew a bubble that went across the top of the vase, and one just hovered on the top, and we filmed it and we caught it, and it had these wonderful colours, and it was just lovely. And so when she came back, we showed it to her, and she was just amazed, wasn't she? She was just so surprised.
It seemed to impact all of them quite forcefully, I have to
Yes.
say. And I mean, we'd gone in there, I suppose, with community arts projects, you've got to be, well, the first thing we learned was that you've got to be flexible. We went in there with this idea that they were going to bring us, they were going to turn up, they were going to have time to sit with us and bring us their object of inspiration, and we were going to get them to make artwork. Of course, forgetting that if you're doing a start-up business, time is not something you have huge amounts of.
No.
So it ended up with them bringing us objects, talking to us about it, and us responding to the objects that they had. And we did get them making things. We're just going to go back to the slides, and we got them to draw around some of their objects after they placed them on a light box. As a way of adding to an enormous paper screen that we'd erected.
Because so many of these people said they could not draw and didn't want to draw. But when they saw it, that it was so large, they actually felt that they could take a pencil and draw around the shape.
Yes, it's something we developed while I was working at Birmingham Metropolitan College when I was doing the drawing outline initiative, and it wasn't my idea. I forget whose idea it was now, but it's proved incredibly useful. Right, we won't bother with that one. Yeah, let's have the. So this was an object that one of the people brought us, which was really a memory of her mother, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Her mother had given it to her.
And she explained certain things about her mum, and Sarah made an audio piece for her.
I'm sitting here thinking about all the people I love, knowing that I have given them a little memento or a memory or something that they can hang on to when they're feeling sad and lonely. It's important that everyone should know that they are forgiven, and it is only love that I send out to all. And I want people to be happy and content with their lives and to feel fulfilled with whatever it is they're doing. Death is awful for those who remain behind, and death is sad for the people who have died as they don't complete their projects. But other than that, life has to go on, and time is so short. You need to spend every moment doing as much as you can, enjoying as much as you can, and being good.
And then at the end, after we'd engaged with, I forget how many, they would come and go, we had an exhibition that we put up of things, some of which they'd made, but we have to say that, as I say, we had to be flexible, and really it was stuff that we'd made in response to the stories that we were starting to hear from them. And we had an exhibition in the unit, which we had for the 2 weeks we were there. I'm talking as if we're looking at the slides. And these were some of the things that we started to put up that... and I've got out of sequence. Should we look at this film?
Yes.
Oh, we're out of... the cunning plan has disintegrated. Sarah promised you no chaos tonight. I've obviously not read that script.
That's
so somebody came in with a beatbox. Was it a picture of a beatbox earlier? Hold on,
yeah,
let's see.
back there.
Yeah, here we go. And I forget what... He was part of a team developing some musical tech or other, but this obviously wasn't it. It was just a beatbox. And he sort of challenged us to make something in response to this beatbox. So we came up with a film of using the good old glue gun.
We actually had an enormous amount of fun because we didn't know what was going to arrive every day when we opened up, who would come in, what they'd bring, what they'd say to us. So we were having to work very much, spontaneously.
And we had to have a colossal amount of stuff. So Sarah mentioned that we'd done something with bubbles for Mary, who was developing the dementia app on her phone. Well, of course, only Sarah would have a bubble mixture around in her bag. I had a glue gun, so I suppose I can claim some credit.
Come on, we both brought all
And the
sorts
other
of
thing that the
things.
innovation project got us doing really was setting the blueprint for how In Public would operate. So we free of charge for this one, thanks Patrick, Matt and Ben, who you can see here. So we tried to involve other artists. Patrick did his swirly gig things with his films that he does, and using paper as well, down from the balcony at the top here. And of course everyone rushes out to see what the hell's going on. So that was a great attraction, and Ben was helping with engaging people and filming it and live streaming it and things of that sort. So it set the sort of
Tone.
yes, and the sort of the model that we've used in all our different projects really. Although, as I say, it was our first one,
Yes.
and this was the exhibition where we showed all the work that they'd done and we'd done. As I say, mostly us. And people just dropped in during the day and that evening to see what other stories have been exposed.
Yeah.
Come back to us on that.
And, what was so lovely was that when we told people that we were going, they actually said, well, couldn't you come back in about 6 months' time and we could have another go at all of this? Because they'd found it actually a great diversion to the hard work that they were all doing and the thinking and planning that they were all involved in.
What was interesting, I think, for both of us, although I'm putting words in your mouth here really, is that you uncovered really interesting stories all the time. The guy who worked at the catering, whose name I've forgotten, which I feel terrible
Miguel?
about.
Was it a Miguel?
It might have
been Miguel.
It might have been. That was such a sweet story about his childhood and his mother telling them fairy stories, and Mary with a dementia app, and Martin with his hair, which I cannot remember the significance of. Oh, I know. We asked him, when he came in for his initial chat, we asked him what object, he couldn't think of what object would be of inspiration for him. So he said, well, what would you say? I think this was one of Sarah's ways of getting at people, in a nice way. She said, well, what would you say from your burning building? Expecting him to say perhaps photographs of his wife or something. And he said, oh, this ceramics hair statue that I bought. So that was obviously what he had to bring in, because it was the thing he was going to say from the burning building. I can't remember whether we ever got to the significance of
No, we never found out why this hair meant so much to him.
which is slightly bizarre.
Which was a bit strange. But anyway, he brought the hair in and he was very pleased with the wonderful drawings that Ian did. Because Ian drew the hair, but there was a kind of a story behind the drawings as well.
I literally did them in front of him, and I finished them off when he wasn't there.
Yeah.
So you get used to improvising and doing things fast and having instant judgments being made. Right, so the next project is at the MAC. We worked with 5 primary schools prior to going into the MAC, which we called primary portraits. In fact, we'll try. Oh, Sarah's going to do it manually.
There you go.
So we went into primary schools and taught people how to make portraits. I treated the primary school kids as if they were foundation students, and I taught them about measurement and tone and things like that. I think that one's actually from Nita's Friction Arts group, if I remember rightly. So I didn't do that. That's Nita. No. And it's a monoprint, I think. Yeah. So the idea was to give pupils, very young pupils, an art school experience rather than something that is dumbed down in any way, even if they didn't understand all of it. And they would make portraits of people. And the idea was, following this initial primary portraits, the idea was to... Well, I'm sort of monopolising it really.
No, it's absolutely fine.
It was an extension of one of Sarah's earlier projects.
Yes, I did it initially in Birmingham at St Martin's, but then when Ian and I got together we thought that this had some mileage, and so we decided to ask children and grandparents to have a conversation. And we asked the children to interview their grandparents and find out about them. Because with the conversations I'd had with many children, and I'd asked the children, what's your granny like? What's your granny's name? They didn't know their name. And so...
They just knew them as granny or granddad.
Exactly. So I just thought, no, it'd be really nice to get, the children to know a bit more about their grandparents. So we asked them to interview their grandparents, but also to do a portrait.
The sort of grandparents were categories, weren't they? They weren't sort of real people that they knew about.
No.
It was granny and granddad. It wasn't Philip, who was in the war, who was,
No, they knew nothing.
They just knew nothing about
It was
them.
Granny who baked nice cakes and who gave them sweets and took them out on treats.
So the basic idea was to open up a conversation between the under 12s, was it?
Yes.
And the over 60s.
Yes.
Which seemed quite old at the time, but of course now I know the 60 doesn't seem quite so old, but anyway. So we worked with these 5 primary schools, and then it ended up in a series of workshops that anybody could come to at the MAC. Where we were working with other artists again. Jessica Davis did the interviewing sessions, where they were interviewing the older person. There's a lovely slide. Here it is. I mean, this sums up the project really.
Yes.
The younger grandson.
Yes.
was
interviewing his grandpa.
I've never had a senior moment.
And the children actually did the writing, sometimes with a little help from the grandparents, but on the whole, the children did the writing. And they had the whole of the morning doing that. So it was a heavy session.
And then in the afternoon, they came to me and we started doing the portraits. And then they were all exhibited at the MAC as if they were brilliant pieces of artwork. We wanted the artwork to be treated as if it was absolutely...
In a gallery.
To treat it with absolute respect. And this was the exhibition which Paul Newman and Dave Miller helped us curate.
Which was fantastic.
Well, when I say helped us curate, probably just...
They did it all. Yes, they did.
And the other interesting thing about the project was that you'll notice in the cabinets here there are some images, and Sarah had asked them to bring in a photograph of the older person when they were in their 20s and a current photograph, which was a lovely conversation breaker, as it were, and started a whole series of conversations about a life led and a life it lived. And at the private view, the conversations and atmosphere was just absolutely fantastic. And it looks there, because we were in the community arts corridor, as I called it. Obviously, the MAC prefers to think of it as their community arts gallery.
Yes.
But it is the corridor leading down to the theatre. And it looks here as if it wasn't well attended, but I'll show you a slide in a minute.
It was very well attended.
Shows it wasn't.
And, of course, the MAC was very supportive, and Arts Council England gave us money to help us to put this on and to pay, you know, what we had to pay to enable us to do this.
And I think this slide really sums up what the project was about. You know, you've got older person in the arms or hugging a younger person, pointing at this portrait that they've made of them, and the texts, the interviews and the poems are on the other side. So it kind of opens up this personal debate, this personal conversation. And I was staggered that over 70 people turned up to the private view and the prize giving, which was, absolutely
it was
fabulous.
Very, very well attended, and in fact, yes, it was much better than we had hoped for. And the children really seemed to engage with it, and they loved it. And the grandparents did as well. But what the grandparents said to us is that, can we do it again, please? Because they would like to do some drawing, and they would have liked to have drawn their grandchildren.
Yeah, we really missed out. That was an obvious move that we should have tweaked faster, really.
Yes.
But then it would have been truly interactive, a true conversation.
Yes, but next time.
Yes, just need funding.
Just need funding, absolutely.
Our Arts Council listening? Where are they? Okay, so shall we come back to us for a minute? Because we're on to the next one now. And I'm conscious that...
Yes?
No, I wasn't thinking of time.
Oh,
you were looking at the clock. No,
I thought you were looking at
I
time.
was just conscious of the fact that otherwise it's like death by PowerPoint.
It is, yes, which is a bit much.
Yes. So, I'm talking too much. Do you
you're not.
Do you want to introduce the next one?
No. We were asked to go up to Stoke to...
Well, we put in a proposal.
You
make it sound as if people know us now.
No.
But we get phone calls.
How did we hear that they were even looking for people? I can't remember.
It was your daughter-in-law.
Oh, Wendy, yes,
sent
us an email saying that this is out. Why don't you apply? And we did.
It was called Live Age.
It was called Live Age, and it was the New Vic Theatre,
Keele
University,
Aid UK,
yeah,
and somebody else. I can't remember.
And yes, so we put in a proposal. We had to go up, and we were interviewed. And we heard that, yes, we'd been successful, and they'd found a group that we could work with, and they were over 60.
It was specifically about creativity in older age.
Yes.
Older age?
Yes.
As you get older.
Yes. Anyway, this group met on a Wednesday afternoon at the West End, it was called.
West
church.
End Arts and Social Club.
But it was attached to a church as well. And literally... they said the brief was go and agitate a bit because they all meet up. They know a group of them know each other very well. They've been doing this for years, but it's about time that they were stretched and made to think a bit differently.
And our proposal had been that because we knew we were going to be dealing with older people, not that much older than us in some cases, but anyway, older people. Our basic pitch was we want to give them an art school experience so that everybody is worth the kind of intensity of experience you would get at art college. So we came up with a programme that included drawing, painting, collage, sculpture, performance art. Now, think about that for a minute. You're talking about people who are over 70, in some cases 80, and they're being told about performance art. So that was an interesting session. Where I was dragged out by Sarah, completely exhausted at the end of that one. But,
but the thing was that we were asked to go up and meet the people before we actually started. And we walked into this room of 15, 16 people.
I thought there were more than that. There felt more.
Oh, well, there may have been 20.
Did the elderly take up more room?
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, they were all sitting there, and we introduced ourselves. And we said that we were coming to run workshops on the Wednesday afternoon. And you could see them all bristle, and they all started to fold their arms.
And there was a stony silence.
And you could very well tell that actually they didn't want us.
And I thought, there's not enough money to pay for this.
And we were beginning to think, oh help, what do we do? So I just started talking a bit, and then we split ourselves up and worked either side of the table, talking to each person.
Although this is where
individually.
Sarah's skills come into play. Sarah has what's known as soft skills, and she worms her way into people without them realising. And next thing you know, they're telling her all sorts of stuff, intimate stuff. And next thing you know, they're open to suggestions.
Well, literally, we got back round from the going round the table, and I stood there and I thought, oh well, if they don't want us, they don't want us. But all I said was, right, will you play with us? We will come, we will challenge you, we will do different things, and each week will be slightly different. And suddenly they laughed, and we thought, thank goodness for that, we're in.
And again, we had to be flexible. We got this whole art school experience planned out. They were all going to do boards themselves that were going to be about various categories
Aspects
that we come
of
up
their
with.
life.
And that was the first thing we had to ditch because they didn't want to do individual things. That put too much pressure on them. So we immediately went to communal boards that they would add to if they felt like it. We had to keep saying, well, we'll do this, and if you want to ignore us, that's fine. Or if you want to contribute, that's fine. So you have to be flexible.
We had to be very flexible, and some of them just did not want to play and would sit and watch us and knit.
The knitters.
There were a group of knitters. Yes.
A bit closer.
Yeah.
So here we are, sort of. There were biscuits, which was nice.
And the mugs of tea, which was
and we had to
fabulous.
wait. It was only a 2-hour session, and we had to wait until they'd made the tea and given out the biscuits and taken the subs. So a 2-hour session became pretty much a 1-hour session.
Yes.
So it was fun. But as you can see, Sarah's soft skills ingratiated themselves, and we became firm friends with some of them.
Yes, they were lovely.
And this woman actually knitted this what's the name of the
It's
women's auxiliary something or other?
Yes, it's the women's. Yes, it's the WAFs. Right? Yes.
Because she was in the WAFs, or she knew someone.
No. It was because my father had one of those dolls that my grandma had knitted, and I found the old pattern, and I asked the knitters if they could make one. Because I'd made one and it hadn't been the right shape at all, and a couple of them took the patterns and came up with them and beautifully made.
And you found again is this thing about stories. This lady was started researching into one of her relatives, who was one of the painters who would paint onto the plates at Wedgwood. And this research kind of just took over, and she did masses of it, and she was fascinating about this thing, and produced these boards, the design sheets, effectively of things that she'd researched and things that she'd painted herself, and she got quite interested in making the textures for the kilns that she was looking at, and it got to the point where we started to hear so many stories. I'm going to ignore that one for a minute. Can I ignore it? Yes, I can. We started to hear so many stories that we thought, right, we're not going to be able to capture these through normal art activities. So I while Sarah was doing whatever we planned for that day, I took them, those who wanted to. I don't want to give the impression we forced them. I took them into another room and interviewed them to camera, as it were, to capture some of their other stories. It's all right, I'm clicking the slides thinking I'm going to get to the one that illustrates this point, but I'm not getting into it. But so there is a film on the In Public website. There is a film where they are literally talking to camera about some of the stories that we were hearing. For example, this lady here, this is her performance piece. It's not a video, it's just a still. She was a keen amateur dramatic performer, to the point at which she actually, semi-professional almost, and all of a sudden it emerged that she'd worked with Robbie Williams. Not when he was mega famous, I hasten to add, when he was 11. and apparently he wasn't a very good dancer, and she'd have to try and help him.
He was quite a brat.
And it was a bit of a pain in the the celebrity. This was how we did the performances. Again, we resorted to our shadow screen. It's become our sort of standby, isn't it?
Because people can't be identified.
Yes, exactly.
Because they were shy naturally. They'd never done anything like this, and suddenly to be asked to perform, doing it behind the screen, it gave them a sense of security.
Yes. You're not identifiable. Well,
No.
I mean,
No.
you can tell us. You can tell us.
We knew who they were by the end, but it was.
So these two were firm friends, but they acted out an argument where it finally ends up in a punch up. Whether it was sort of whether there was latent hostility there, I don't know. It seemed a strange thing to act out, but there we go. And these were the boards that they produced that we grouped together in various themes, family. Pets and animals, and they came up with the themes, I hasten to add.
Yes, we didn't, and this all ended up as an exhibition
at the Potteries
Museum
and
and Art Gallery. Yes,
which we don't have a shot of the actual exhibition, but we do have some shots of the. Yes, this was the final event. We did a workshop for drop-in people. And this again shows how much respect and affection we now held each other in. I don't mean me and Sarah, I mean us and the group.
Yes.
Is that the group, we said to them, come along if you like, and help out.
Yes.
And they almost all turned up with their families.
Yes.
So this room, which was also the exhibition space, was absolutely bulging with people because we had some drop-in audience as well.
Yes.
And the woman who organised it came round and said, "Good God, what's going on here?" And
never seen so many people.
It was so, and they gave us presents. It was so sweet.
At the end, they gave me a mug, and they gave you.
I was jealous because yours said world's greatest artist.
I know.
But mine perhaps was more important, and it said I was an honorary Stokey.
Yes.
And it was a little ceramic figurine.
Yes.
And I must just mention this lady whose name I've forgotten.
Isabella?
No. Her story was one of the strangest, really.
It started us off thinking we needed to capture these stories.
Yeah, and she was from Holland originally, and she said, "Oh, I remember the start of the Second World War." I said, "Do you?" She said, "Yes, my father woke me up and said, the Germans are invading, let's go down to the front and have a look," which struck me as bizarre. So apparently they got on their bikes, and it was only a couple of miles down the road. They cycled down the road to see the German advance, and cycled into the Dutch defensive positions. And the Dutch soldiers were saying to them, "Go back, get out of the way, don't be silly.
Go home.
And we were expecting the Germans to drop by parachute anyway, so we don't know they're coming this way." And I was completely flabbergasted, I have to say. I'd never heard anything like it. It was, yeah. So we thought we've got to record this.
Yes.
We've got to record this. Shall we come back to us for a second? I'm conscious of just sort of boring them with images.
Yes.
Yeah, so we really connected with these people and hearing these stories. And again, it sort of makes you aware that scratch the surface of any individual. That's slightly sort of medical. But beneath every person, there's these stories, and some of them are amazing.
Yeah, they're incredible, and also that they trusted us with them, and were happy to tell not only us but the group as well. And what happened was that there were people in the group who'd never heard these stories, even though they'd known the people for many, many years.
Yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it? That was bizarre.
And that seemed very, very strange to us. But also it meant that new friendships were formed as well, which was, one of the things I think that we were there for, so that we kind of made them into one great big clique of people rather than, twos or threes.
Yeah, there's a few more slides from that project. This is relevant really because it's what Sarah's going to be doing with a workshop on, I was going to say Friday, but
on Saturday. Saturday at 11:30 on Zoom.
So one of the things that we do with people that's very much Sarah's initiative is that we'll make things out of sellotape, which is a very common material. Everyone has some, and you can use it as a casting material. And when combined with lights, this one is just positioned on the lights, this one is held behind a light box, a shadow screen effectively. You can get some absolutely exquisite results. And of course it matches Sarah's project of the invisibility of the older person, because it is literally see-through.
And it enables the people to do something in about 2 hours. And they can go home with it completed, which is always important, because each session we had to have something that the people could do in that time.
And you can talk to them about the transformation of ordinary everyday materials.
Yes.
So sellotape, which you use to mend your piece of paper that you've ripped, suddenly becomes this gorgeous object, which when you put it on a light box and take a photograph of it, is something that would be worth a frame, as it were. And all of a sudden you've won them.
Yes.
They're interested because it looks so fabulous.
Yes. Right, next project. Oh, well, this happened in Stratford. We worked with the Willows Primary School, a lovely school, and we worked with, what were they, 9-year-olds? 7, 8, 9?
Now you're asking.
I think they were younger.
Final year, wasn't it?
Was it 9, 10 then? They look younger there, though, that's all. But anyway... and this was to do with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford.
And Mencap.
And we were asked to devise a project about poetry and peace.
This one didn't come from a proposal, did it?
No.
This one came from you smoozing and,
yes.
and talking to people.
Yes, this one came because I'd met somebody at something else, and she'd said, oh, I've got to do something, and I just came up with this idea. And then she said, well, come and see me. And from that, I came up with, an idea about the poetry and said to Ian, help.
We still wrote a proposal, I hasten to add. And,
yes. Yes.
And actually we stuck to it quite strictly in this case.
We had to write a proposal. Well, they were paying us for it as well.
Yes,
so we had to, do all the figures and everything.
So basically, it was opening up conversations between Mencap and the people who were going there and who were struggling with mental issues. The primary school, the very young students, and the poets who were associated with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust.
Yes.
They'd run other events, and they'd got a group of poets who were associated with them. And with our usual disregard for, should we really be doing this? Because we're not really literary people, we said yes anyway. This is what we'll do. So it was a poetry conversation, effectively opened up between these groups.
What we got the children to do is to write to the poets and asking them literally to set them a challenge. To set the children a challenge. Now, for many of these children, letter writing was something that they'd not done very often, so it was welcomed in the schools. And in the knowledge that they were going to get a letter back from somebody who was a poet was very exciting, because many of them had not actually received letters.
The children were paired off. We literally, there was a poet per child, almost. I mean, we had to fudge it slightly, don't tell the children. But they got an individual letter back from the poet with a challenge and a poem that they had to respond to.
Yeah.
And then we went to Mencap with the poet's poem, and they responded. And so there was this big conversation that was going on. Shall we show some slides related to it? So we went into school, and we had to work out how you get a group to write a poem in a very short space of time. We only had one lesson, didn't we?
Yes.
So we thought, right, post-it notes, write words that you think are associated with your idea of peace. And
Stick
we
it up on the board.
started developing a giant post-it note sort of collage. Actually, I've just noticed I quite like this drawing that was already on the board there that says coma. I don't know whether that was a comment on the teacher at the time or what. But,
or going to be a comment on us.
And in case you're wondering, this was the group were known as the Pandas. So Good Morning Pandas was what the teacher wrote. So now here's where fabulous things happen when you're working with people. So some of the post-it notes, they started, because they're sticky, they started sticking them together. And then they started wearing them. And I think the first ones that did it thought to themselves, I'm being naughty here, I'll do it surreptitiously behind the bit at the back. And I spotted them and I thought, Jesus, that's rather interesting. And I whipped them out into the photographic studio bit that we'd set up in the corridor and started photographing them with these long poems that they were wrapping around themselves and now wearing.
And using as garments, yes.
Yes, because it was just such a fabulously interesting
so
thing.
Novel, so different.
And in a way, once they did that, they relaxed. And they came up with some really rather good poems.
Oh, they
actually.
came up with some excellent poems.
I mean, they wrote. There wasn't just the words in an order, as it were. They literally wrote proper poems. Then we went to Mencap, and we did the same thing. So that here they are holding up their sort of thoughts on peace, as it were. This was obviously more challenging. Some of them couldn't write very easily. Some of them didn't want to write, but they would happily talk to Sarah and tell her things.
Yeah, and those that couldn't write, there were helpers in the room as well, and they were invaluable because they actually knew the people and could encourage as well as us, and also write down what they were saying.
This guy was interesting. He was obsessed with Tarzan. He'd read all the original Tarzan books. By Edgar Rice Burroughs. I say all the original Tarzan books. I don't know if there is more than one, come to think of it. But anyway, he was keen to talk about Tarzan and the original stories, which was fine. And then it kind of climaxed at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, where we'd managed, I think, probably through Sarah's soft skills again, at getting people to agree to things. This is the Young Poet Laureate for Staffordshire, whatever the county is that Stratford's in.
Warwickshire.
Warwickshire. No,
Yes.
that's not right, surely.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, well, anyway, she was the Young Poet Laureate. So she composed a poem and read it to the families and the poets, and then we had sort of activities that they could do to add to these things, and the poems were read.
By some of the volunteers
Who were dressed in Shakespearean costume.
in Shakespearean costume, yes.
And all the poems were up on the wall with the student responses, with the pupil responses and the Mencap poems and so on and so forth. Oh, I forgot to mention the black boxes.
Well, all of this started really with me thinking we could take a black box and everything could be put into the black boxes, all the poems, but then the children could write one word on the box, and then the poets could write a word on the box, and then Mencap could write a word on the box. And then when we did a wall of boxes, people could move them around and actually make poetry, different poems.
It's another way of trying to get people to make stuff without realising they're making stuff, and sometimes something profound came out, and sometimes it was just people messing about. But the event again was so well attended, and this again sort of sums it up in a way. We've got a very young poet or very young pupil who's written a poem talking to one of the older poets, having both had their poems read out by the Shakespearean dressed actors. There's one standing under Shakespeare himself.
Yes.
Although we missed his head off. We've got one more set of slides. We're probably going to run out of time. I have a sneaking suspicion, but
we might, but that's absolutely fine. If we suddenly go blank, you'll know that we've run out of time.
I don't mean we suddenly sort of just.
We've gone blank. No, yeah. I mean if the screen goes blank,
be cut off.
We'll be cut off, and you'll know that we've ended. So I'd like to just say thank you so much, all of you, for listening and for joining tonight, and that I'll be back on myself tomorrow night. Talking about invisibility and the work that I am making, and a bit about the workshop on Saturday. So anyway, we will now continue with one of our other projects, which was at Birmingham University. University of Birmingham. Yes.
Yeah. And this links me more closely in with this, because
yes.
I think it's true to say that Sarah's work is more naturally participatory. And this is through my work with Professor Kostas Nikolopoulos, where I've been working with a particle physicist for my own personal practice, But when we had to do some workshops, obviously I do them as in public with Sarah.
Which is great because, you know, it's lovely to be included
Absolutely.
in. So,
and lovely to have you included
thank
because
you.
it's horrible trying to think up things on your own.
And
anyway.
And working with 15-year-olds can sometimes be quite interesting.
So let's so here what we're trying to do. This is probably not the greatest slide when we're showing them in this manner, but the idea is that Costas is a particle physicist. We have to visualise quantum mechanics in easy terms. So this drawing here, for example, a student has spread a charcoal ground across a drawing. The charcoal ground represents the magnetic field in the detector, and the lines that they draw in with a rubber represent the movement of the particle through the detector. And it's trying to find ways of, and there's a bigger example which would have been easier to talk about, but there we go. So it's a way of trying to get them to realise that what sounds very complicated, particles interacting at a quantum level, nevertheless can be got across to people in quite simple terms. We did a whole series of experiments with different drawings. I haven't got an elastic band one for some bizarre reason,
right.
but the elastic band, which I think was Sarah's idea, was a way of trying to show that we got them drawing with an elastic band and pulling the pencil against an elastic band to try and show that quarks, for example, if anyone knows their particle physics, never appear singularly, they only appear in groups, and they are ferociously difficult to separate, and they are held together by the strong force, which is carried by the gluon. So we used an elastic band to
glue on.
To represent this fact. And again, we were keen to give the students an art school experience. So we took them through drawing, sculpture, photography, and what's become our trademark, performance.
Yes.
And this is them sort of trying to work out, having had an input from Costas, having had some basic particle physics inputs.
Yeah, they were then trying to be particles and come up with some form of performance.
Yes, and here are some examples. So this is a collision event. You'll understand why in a moment. Whoa, there we go. And the particle is now splitting into other particles. We sometimes have time to do a bit of editing with them. Sometimes not. It's just raw footage and we send it to the school afterwards. This is the particle decaying. This young lady was rather thought of herself a bit of a dancer, and so she takes rather longer to decay than we were hoping. And as she decays again, she's split into two different particles. These particles refuse to take their blazers off.
Even though it was a very hot day.
So they have school blazers, those particles. Luckily, one of the blazers is now being used to demonstrate quarks who can't be separated due to the gluon, which is actually, as I say, one of the blazers that they finally managed to get off the other pupils. And you can see that the glue gun experiments are being used in the background to show the power and the energy that might be generated in these quantum events. And Costas had mentioned antimatter, and somebody had spotted on my iMovie editing suite that there was a button that swaps things over, so it was a perfect opportunity to let them do that. Oh, that's the end of the slides. We can chat before we end.
Excellent, wonderful. Oh, very good.
So we didn't get cut off.
No, we haven't got cut off. No, that's fantastic.
So that was a toughie, really, because I when we first started doing the workshops, I'd only just started working with Costas, and I didn't really understand quantum mechanics. Obviously, I do now.
I still don't. I know
I'm
a
joking.
bit.
I haven't got a clue.
I know a little bit, but my goodness me, it's a different world again.
But it was another one where art opens up the difficult topics.
Opens up the conversation,
Yeah.
and enables people to try things out and to understand more fully. And all the students went away with a board, didn't they?
Yeah, an A1 design sheet.
An A1 design sheet, which they could actually use towards their exams if they wanted to.
Yes, I mean, the work was very experimental, and some of them would say, well, it's just scribbling. And I did say to them, yes, it is. It could be just scribbling. You have to contextualise it. And we showed them some examples of artists they should be looking at. And if the teachers picked it up when they got back from school, when they got back to school, it could have been used for a GCE submission as part of their exam work. It would have counted. We did one. We now devised one for primary schools.
Yes.
With Costas, which it was even more challenging, but it can be done, and they love it.
Yes. Yes. Well, charcoal is a great success, no matter what age. When you're working with primary school children, it can become incredibly messy.
Oh, we had the naughty bench.
We had a naughty bench where they had literally covered their faces,
I forgot about the naughty bench.
their hands, and heaven knows what their parents thought when they got home, and their clothes. But
One of the primary schools that we worked at with the earlier project, the primary portraits before the MAC workshop, slightly took advantage of us in that they had us in the hall and sent through groups of 20 in waves, so much so that, and I had to do an introduction on the stage in order for...
so that they could see,
so
because
they could
there were
see.
so many of them.
And we suddenly realised that there was a bench developing, like a substitute bench on the...
Yes.
on the
Sidelines.
on the touchline, who were looking slightly messy, and we found out later on it was the naughty bench. And if people had smeared charcoal all over themselves, they were relegated.
But they all loved
to
it.
the naughty bench.
They all found it, very exciting to be allowed to put a black ground down and not be told off for getting dirty hands.
And our ethos with all of these things is everyone gets treated as if they're an artist. Everyone gets treated as if they're going to be. They're going to take this on board, absolutely. We don't dumb it down at all. And whatever the subject or topic that we're trying to get across, whether it's quantum mechanics or whether it's just opening up a conversation between the elderly and the young, everything has to be treated with utmost seriousness.
And respect.
Although we try and have a good time. And
yes,
we try
and make sure that everybody who's participating is having a good time. Because, if not, we wouldn't be invited back to do things. So anyway, hopefully next year, when people can meet up again, we can perhaps start again and find some people who would, like to have us working with them.
We'll force ourselves on some more hard-to-reach audiences.
Yes.
The one disappointing thing about the workshops at first with Costas was, of course, that the university works with lots of grammar schools, so they were bringing grammar schools in. So it wasn't like we were dealing with hard-to-reach audiences, or
no.
You felt that they were privileged kids.
Yes.
And it was nice that during the collision event show that I had at the library, where again Sarah and I did the workshops, we deliberately tried to target schools that were less well-resourced.
Yes.
And we had an absolute lovely response from one of the teachers who was terrified about bringing her group because she was worried they'd let the school down and let her down and be a pain to us and so on and so forth. And they were the best group we'd ever had. They were so keen and wanting to learn. And the tutor sent us a little note afterwards saying, "I must learn not to underestimate my students."
Yeah, it was...
and you treated them like artists and physicists, and
they behaved.
They responded.
And they responded, yes. And we didn't lose any either, which is always a bonus, because we were in an open arena really where they could have wandered off, but they didn't. They stayed with us.
I thought you meant death. I thought you meant we didn't actually manage to lose any from this earth. But
No, nobody wandered off. No, which they could have done because we were in the library. But no.
And as you probably realise, that this kind of outreach is our passion really, and the same things. I'm going to do some shameless advertising now.
Oh, go on.
The same topics are going to come up during my first Zoom presentation on Monday as part of Monday Makers. Is it Steamhouse or BCU or anyway whoever's asked me to do that? It's called Monday Makers, and the same topics are going to come up again because this is something that we're passionately
nice
involved
comments
in.
here from my son Paul. Fantastic representation of spin space, uncertainty, and subatomic particles. tackling real subjects that are hard to conceptualize is a great way to explore a subject from different angles. Share the link with the group. Oh, really great. Thanks, Paul, for that.
And I mean, the charcoal ground can operate on different levels, so you can have something that is just to do with the magnetic field in the detector, or you can start introducing ideas about the Higgs field, the Higgs boson, and how it operates in the background hum of the universe, giving the particles more mass.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Kind words. Much appreciated.
I'm surprised we haven't been cut off.
I know. I kept thinking it because we started at
exactly an hour ago.
25 past 7. I thought that suddenly we would go absolutely blank. Oh, lovely hearts.
Anyway, we're available for parties and bar mitzvahs and anything like that, because all the work's dried up.
Yes. No, well, as we say.
Don't clap, throw money.
Hopefully we will be able to do some more workshops next year. Anyway, we're going to end now. Thanks ever so much for watching and your support. And I'll be back on tomorrow night, 7:30. So, love to you all. Bye for now. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.